Title: A Night of Ghostly Revelry. Sir Winston hosts Samuel Pepys in the hallowed halls of Westminster. In the eerie, ghost-lit halls of Westminster, where the living never dare tread after dusk, Sir Winston Churchill, cigar in hand, hosts a lively gathering of the spectral elite. This wasn't your average afterlife soiree. No, tonight, the spectral royalty, including Henry VIII, Queen Victoria, Elizabeth I, and George VI, had gathered for a night of unearthly revelry. And at the center of the chaos stood none other than Samuel Pepys, with both of his wives on each arm, looking as puffed up and pompous as ever. This narrative is sponsored by Polly Speaks For You. The creator of Polly Speaks For You has always been passionate about empowering individuals, especially those with disabilities or learning challenges, through text-to-speech and voice recognition technology. Polly Speaks For You isn't just a tool. It's a bridge for people to communicate and interact with the world in a meaningful way. By blending historical storytelling with cutting-edge tech, the creator showcases how powerful a voice can be, whether telling your own story or preserving history. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button and help this channel grow. Now back to the story. Well, if it isn't the man who single-handedly turned his own life into a scandalous soap opera. Sir Winston's deep voice boomed through the room as Pepys made his entrance, his diary tucked under one arm as if it were a prized jewel. Pepys gave a little cough, trying to regain some dignity, though his cheeks, if ghosts could blush, seemed to glow with embarrassment. I documented history, Sir Winston. I captured life as it was, every grand event. Oh yes, every grand event, interrupted Queen Elizabeth I, lounging casually in a high-back chair, including the event where you kissed the maid in the pantry and your wife nearly caught you. That was a thrilling entry. She smirked as the room burst into raucous laughter, ghostly hands slapping ghostly thighs. Pepys, still clutching his diary, looked positively scandalized. Your Majesty, he sputtered. Those were mere trifles compared to the Great Fire of London and the Plague, which I also documented with great care. And trifles. Queen Victoria roared from her ghostly throne, her booming voice causing the chandeliers to shake. I read your diary cover to cover, Pepys. I dare say it should have been titled The Lusty Life of Samuel Pepys. Half of it reads like the bawdiest novel, you naughty boy. The laughter was uncontrollable now. Even George VI, who was usually quite reserved, was leaning back in his chair, chuckling heartily. I must admit, Samuel, he said between chuckles, I always wondered how you found the time to document history when you seem to be so, shall we say, preoccupied with other matters. Pepys, looking very much like a cornered animal, glanced nervously at his two wives, both of whom had their arms looped through his. One raised a sharp eyebrow at him, clearly not impressed by his ghostly attempts to wriggle out of his past. Samuel, the wife on his left, hissed, Don't even think of denying anything. We were there, remember? Oh yes, the wife on his right chimed in, her voice cold as ice, and we read the diary after you died. Every word. Pepys visibly deflated. It was hard to argue with the women who had, quite literally, haunted him through life and death. He let out a weak sigh. Well, I suppose I did get a bit carried away with some of my entries. Carried away? King Charles II, lounging across the room with his feet up on a spectral ottoman, cackled loudly. Pepys, you turned an administrative job into the greatest love story that never happened. You didn't just kiss the maid. You practically wrote an epic about it. The monarchs howled with laughter. Even Henry VIII, who was juggling a turkey leg and an apple, both of which, despite being a ghost, he seemed determined to devour. Pepys, my boy, Henry chortled, you could have had a seat at my court. If only you'd have been a little more discreet. Discreet, yes, Pepys blurted, clinging to the last shreds of his dignity. I was discreet. That's why it's in my private diary, not public knowledge. Henry doubled over with laughter, slamming his turkey leg onto the ghostly table. A private diary that everyone has now read for centuries. You're the worst kind of secret keeper. One who thinks he's keeping secrets, but writes them down in such juicy detail that no one can resist reading them. Sir Winston, tears of laughter in his eyes, clapped Pepys on the back so hard the poor man nearly dropped his beloved diary. "My dear Pepys, if discretion were your aim, you might have considered writing in code. You do realize every monarch here has read your little scribbles, don't you?" Pepys gaped. "Every monarch?" "Every single one," said Elizabeth I, smirking. "Even the ones who came after your time. Let's just say your diary is quite the popular bedtime read in the afterlife." Pepys' ghostly face had gone a very odd shade of pale. Even in death, he couldn't escape his own legacy. Speaking of indiscretions, Queen Victoria cut in, casting a sideways glance at Pepys' wives. "I must say, having both your wives with you in the afterlife is a rather bold move. How's that working out for you?" The entire room leaned in, grinning wickedly, waiting for Pepys to dig himself into yet another hole. Both wives gave him steely glares, daring him to lie. "Well," Pepys began, nervously adjusting his collar. "It's a delicate balance, you see. One must maintain harmony between all parties involved." "Oh, harmony is it?" Henry VIII howled with laughter again. "Mate, that sounds like a diplomatic nightmare. One wife was enough trouble for me, and you've got two on your hands, and both of them know exactly what you wrote about them." Sir Winston roared, slapping his knee. "That's the real trick, Pepys. It's not writing history that's hard. It's surviving the people who read it." By this point, even Pepys had to laugh, albeit a little nervously. He had, after all, spent his entire life documenting every misstep, blunder, and scandal, not realizing he'd be called to account for it in the afterlife, with both wives as witnesses. Just then, a loud crash interrupted the revelry. The grand doors of the hall swung open, and in floated the ghostly figure of Samuel Johnson, booming with indignation. Who in blazes invited Pepys to this gathering of great minds? His diary is little more than this one. Sir Winston cut in, grinning broadly. "Welcome to the party. Come, join us. We were just discussing Samuel's finer points." Johnson paused, taking in the sight of Pepys squirming under the judgmental gazes of both wives in a room full of historical royalty. His lips curled into a grin. "Well, in that case," he said, settling into a chair, "this promises to be most amusing." And so the night continued, a whirlwind of laughter, jabs, and ghostly drinks as Pepys found himself the reluctant center of attention. Even in death, his life, scandals and all, was an endless source of entertainment for the greats of history. As the candles burned low and the ghostly monarchs took turns teasing poor Pepys, Sir Winston leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile on his face. "To Samuel," he said, raising his cigar in salute. "The man who proved that sometimes history is best when it's written with a little bit of scandal." The ghostly gathering erupted into cheers, and the night in Westminster's haunted halls carried on, with more tales, more laughs, and the kind of hilarity that only the most notorious figures in history could create. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. To learn more about South Africa's leading accessibility software, visit www.polispeaks4u.co.za and support this meaningful dyslexic initiative. Thank you for watching.